to ensure sustainable long-term development. So these are the discussions we'll be having today, the pain points, the economic pain points of Ghanaians today. And Mr. Ahulu is in the studio seated, and I'm also joined by my colleague, Mr. Emmanuel Boatin from our research and analysis desk. Good morning, Mr. Ahulu, and welcome to Z101.9 FM.
Good morning, Jerry, and thanks for the warm welcome, and good morning to our listeners.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. When we talk of economy and we're listening, one of the first words that comes up is inflation. So high inflation. Someone has said that high inflation is one of the biggest banes of this economy. What are the main factors contributing to the high inflation rate in Ghana?
Thanks, Jerry. There are actually a lot of factors when you look at what causes inflation. Broadly speaking, we can divide the factors into two. We can have what we call the demand pull inflation, or factors that are on the demand side, and then we can have also what we call cost push inflation, which is
demand pull and cost push
inflation.
Okay.
Right. Now, when we look at the demand side, we're talking basically about people making demand for goods, or people want to buy goods and services. And for that matter, they want to pay a price for that goods and services. On the contrary, the suppliers of goods may not be sufficient.
Okay.
And for that matter, it's going to be the highest bidder wins. And
Okay.
so price will go up. If you take a typical example, if you take the US dollar as a commodity, for example, that is trading, people are buying the US dollar and people are selling the US dollar. Currently, the situation we have is that more people want to buy US dollars as compared to the number of people willing to sell US dollars. So obviously, the price will go up. So there are a couple of factors on that side. And then on the supply side, where we have cost push, right? So the cost of production necessitates that a certain price be fixed as the selling price. Largely in this country, one would say we are an import-driven economy, meaning we don't produce much. A lot of the things that are sold in the supermarkets and in the shops are things that are imported. And for that matter, as long as the foreign currency is not stable or is depreciating, you will have suppliers factoring those depreciation into their pricing, and then you have price escalating. When you have fuel price go up, for example, right, when you go to the hinterlands, you may get agriculture produce being very cheap. However, you come to Accra and it's a completely different thing, because somebody has to incur cost, logistics, fuel to transport these goods into the city. And by the time they arrive, they will have to factor all that into the selling price.
Okay.
So there are diverse causes of inflation. I must say some or the majority of them are within our control, but obviously some are not within our control. So just to summarize. Yeah.
So those within our control, which are they, and why haven't we done something about them, and why are we struggling to do something about them?
Again, that's it's a myriad of challenges. For those within our control, again, we have taxed people within the economy to take the lead in terms of controlling those. So, for example, if you look at food prices, right? I mean, if we have a very good road network, if we have logistics, if we have warehouses that are closer to the cities, obviously the price of food and food items will come down. The question is, why are we not doing it? I'm not sure I have a
you have an answer to that. Yeah, I get it.
But obviously we see the root causes. We know what we can do in order to reduce food prices. Again, you go to the hinterlands, right, and you will find situations where you find what we call post-harvest losses. Right?
Exactly.
So corn, soya, mango, even fruit, salads, tomatoes, during the harvest season sit in these places only to rot, right? The question is, can we do something about them? In my view, yes, we can do something about them. Why are we not doing something about them? That I don't know.
What can we do about them? Putting warehousing all over the place.
Yes, putting warehousing, processing this. So let's take tomatoes for example, right? If we have tomatoes it's the harvest season.
The glut season.
Yes, one of the ways of keeping tomatoes is to process it, right? Set up a tomato processing factory, process it into paste, and then can them for future use, right? On the other hand, you could, if you have a very good road network from the hinterlands into the cities, then the transit time between sending these vegetables from the hinterland to Accra is very short, right? So they arrive early. Consumers are able to buy them and keep them in their fridges and freezers for as long as they want to. And so making the logistics available is one way. Processing them into paste is another way. Empowering even the farmers to be able to have some form of storage at least a month before they are able to get rid of them is another. So yeah, those are some of the ways.
Interesting. Rising public debt has become a big issue. How has Ghana's rising public debt affected our economic stability and growth prospects?
It has affected us quite a lot, hugely, and I'll explain. So, government basically is a spender. I mean, and government spends by finding money in a couple of ways, either by taxing people through fiscal policy, or government prints money. Money supply or borrowing, going on the money market. Now, the higher the public debt, the less amount of money government has of its tax revenue for development. So if you have your debt to GDP, let's say around 100%, the interest that you have to service on an annual basis can consume almost the entire of your tax revenue, thereby leaving nothing
for you to develop.
And so it's very important that much as, of course, in economics we will say that some amount of borrowing is important for the economy, right? So you need to find a good balance between debt and equity. In the private sector we say debt and equity, but government will say taxation and debt. You have to find that balance so that you don't have a situation where you're spending more than 50% of your tax revenue in servicing those debts. Apart from the challenge of not having additional revenue to develop because you have to finance those debts, you may run into a situation where lenders may be hesitant at even lending to you, right? And if that happens, you obviously find yourself in a very difficult situation, and the consequences, if government cannot develop or they don't have extra income to create the space for private sector to thrive, obviously everybody suffers.
That's quite interesting. So, because I want us to touch on the issues that are prevalent within the economy, and then we'll come down to which ones are the economic pain points. So we've spoken about inflation, we've spoken about public debt. Can we touch on depreciation of the Ghanaian cedi?
Yes, of course.
What role has that also played in our challenges?
So again, it has been a very, very difficult past few years for us as a country. The depreciation of the cedi has played a huge role in the economic challenges that we face. A lot of the euro debt, for example, are in foreign currency. A lot of the imports from abroad are in foreign currency. Now it's even getting worse if you talk of the likes of Starlink that people are subscribing to. That's all in foreign currency, even though your cedi account may be debited. Ultimately, the central bank has to bankroll that in order to pay Starlink, right? Now, with this demand on the dollar comes the depreciation. The impact of this is that every time you go to the supermarket to buy something that is imported, the price will be different. Because even though the seller from abroad is selling the product at, let's say, $10, the rate between the cedi and the dollar at the time that you're buying it may not be 1:1. It may be, let's say, 1:10, for example, and that's 100 cedis. Of course, the shop owner is thinking ahead and knows that he has a very fixed working capital. Let's say he starts with 1,000 cedis as his working capital, right? Which 1,000 cedis gave him, let's say, $100. Every time he's able to buy, let's say, 10 items. So as the cedi depreciates, the only way he or she can keep that working capital is to increase the price. Otherwise, in no time, it's going to erode the entire working capital, right? So the depreciation plays a very huge role in the inflation that we see in the economy.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Now that we're done with the basics of it, why is a country so blessed with natural resources struggling?
That's a question for I think the entire country to answer. I will do my best to provide my view of why I think we are struggling. Obviously, there are a lot of natural resources in this country. We've got gold, we've got cocoa, we've got natural resources, we've got vegetation, we've got arable land. So your question is, why are we struggling? My view is we have not prioritized properly what is important to us as a people. I think a lot of the time, in my view, people have focused on what benefits them. People have focused on short-term incentives. People have not focused on the big picture. People have not focused on what will benefit us as a people, as a country, right? Quick wins, quick solutions, quick fixes has been the order of the day instead of sustainable long-term solutions, right? We have not taken a nationalistic view to issues. We have taken partisan, myopic view to issues, right? I mean, I usually make a joke and say, I think one day when we go to heaven, God is going to give us some canes for starving in this country. And the reason I say that is that there is nowhere in this country that you put a seed that it will not grow. Okay, so why haven't we developed agriculture? We've just paid lip service to agriculture. Why haven't we put the structures, the systems in place? Why haven't we empowered the youth? Why haven't we tailored our educational system to make our people have the mindset of production rather than white-collar jobs, right? I mean, I came out of uni some 21 years ago, and off the top of my mind, or what I was looking for was, or my idea of a job is to sit in some office with a tie, with a computer in front of me. And I think that's still what's going on in our universities, right? We need a mindset shift. We need to change the curriculum. We need to produce. We need to produce something, right? Even if it's just food that we produce. And I think if we can feed ourselves, it is the first step to economic empowerment.
If we can feed ourselves.
Yes.
And we have everything needed to feed ourselves.
We have more than everything. We have more than everything.
So now the part of why we are not doing that one, we'll leave it to the listeners for them to decide.
We will leave it to the listeners to decide. We'll leave that to them to decide.
Mr. Watson, you see why I'm worried. You see why this morning I'm so against anybody who try and make this thing. A nation that is rich in natural resources. And this conversation we're having, this is nothing to do with any government in power.
No.
It's been there since.
Yeah.
Is it pre-colonial or it became a problem when we handed our destiny into our own hands?
Jerry, I think we've not moved beyond the Gettysburg economy.
What they left us is what we are running.
Yeah, that template is still being used up to today.
In education, in everything, in industry.
More particularly in agriculture.
In agri.
Because we failed to have value addition. We failed to diversify. You see, a lot of our people, the data tells us, are employed in the agri sector. However, that agri sector, even if that is our backbone, we have failed to open it up. So
what they left us is what we're still running.
It's still what we are running. Produce, send it
to them.
Exactly.
So your railway lines also show that everything must actually be sent out.
Exactly. And if you look at the way things were done around the colonial era, that is why it's more difficult moving from Ghana to, say, Kenya or South Africa. I mean, goods.
I know what you mean.
Goods from Ghana to, say, the US or any of the European countries. And I think until we move away from that, we may still get stuck or be stuck in this.
And, Jerry, the other thing too is that it's not in the interest of the developed world that we are able to feed ourselves. Okay. And the reason it's not in their interest is that once we begin to feed ourselves, we will become less dependent on them in terms of food. And if you look at the West, for example, they subsidize their farmers hugely in order for them to produce and so they can export to Africa and to the less developed countries. Now, let's turn to our poultry farmers and our pig farmers. And I also speak here with an experience, right? A vast majority of them can't afford feed. And why is that so? Because partly, as a country, we have imposed so much taxes on the ingredients for feed that by the time the feed is landing, it's so expensive that the cost of producing a chicken or a pig in this country is becoming not sustainable, right? Now, apart from the input cost coming from the origin being expensive, we have also added significant taxes on it.
At the port,
and even aside the port, even at the retail joints, we've added VAT and all sort of stuff on it, right? To the point where now people find it more economical or more affordable to import chicken or to import pork into this country.
So someone somewhere is deliberately putting in place policies to ensure that we are unable to produce and we are forced to import.
Yeah.
Yes.
And this is common knowledge to everybody, including those who are leading us.
Of course.
And is it that their hands are tied behind them? That's why they can't do anything.
But Jerry, when you look at sometimes our inflation figures, you would notice that significantly it's import driven. However, when you look at the prices of the things we are importing relative to what is on our traditional market, you realize that what we are importing is cheaper relative to what we have on our traditional market.
Yeah, because Mr. Hulu has clearly explained why.
Yeah.
It becomes more expensive for you to produce here than to import.
Yeah.
That's correct.
And you as a buyer would rather you buy at a cheaper price.
Yes. No. You go for the one that you can
afford.
Yeah,
that's what you can afford.
So your side of the equation we shouldn't even be bothered about.
Yes.
But then in the long run, it is the country that is suffering.
Yeah, and so when I hear the policymakers sometimes say we have a high taste for foreign goods without really addressing the fundamental issues, because for instance, in Nigeria,
so it's not that we have a high taste for foreign goods.
No, it's
a mix of things.
I mean, look,
it's the fact that what we can afford is what we are buying.
Yes. Let's take poultry, for example, and let's take pork, right? Which of us in this country will say they would rather not prefer go to a poultry farm and buy a live bird, slaughter it, and have a fresh meal? Which of us will say, I don't like that. I rather want the one that is frozen.
And we don't know how long it's been frozen.
The only reason people opt for that option is because it's the cheaper of the two.
That's what they can afford.
That's what they can afford.
Sad, but true. Sad, but true. Poultry, pork, and this extends
Even
into other
vegetables.
areas,
Yes,
vegetables and the rest. It's fast approaching 9:20. Mondays, we have what we call the Ghana Report. We talk Ghana. We talk the challenges facing Ghana. This is the Business Breakfast on Z. It's on 101.9 FM. It's an experience you don't want to miss. Conversations that makes you sit up and ask quick questions. And like I keep saying, with Z, you have the last word. When you go and say, I had it on Z, that should end the question. 9:20. We're having Mr. Ebenezer Hulu here, and I'm also joined by my colleague from research and analysis. His name is Emmanuel Boatin. Today was arguing with me about Botswana. You heard him. Anyway, so let's move on to another pain point. Jobs. What have been the key obstacles to creating enough jobs for these teeming youthful population of ours and the masses that are asking for jobs? Why have we not been able to create jobs for our growing youthful population?
Again, it's a couple of factors, Jerry. It's a couple of factors. And let me start with, first of all, education. Okay. So I think the government, and if you read in the economic textbook, it's common knowledge that the government is a bad businessman, right? And the engine of every economy is the private sector. So you need an educational system that churns out graduates who are ready to start a business. For me, that's
very fundamental.
That's fundamental. Because, when you take the West, for example, and take Europe, the vast majority of people are employed by the private sector. Small businesses that employ between 5 and 10 people, right? Not even the big conglomerates. You have thousands, several tens of thousands of this kind of businesses that are hiring 3 people, 5 people, 10 people. And these sort of businesses were set up by graduates, right? So the educational system has to be structured in a manner that people come out with the idea that they're going to start something.
Okay.
Even before they come out, they should have projects. They should have interventions, right? So government must create that enabling environment and have that right educational system. That's the first point. The second point is when the people come out and they're starting, we need to incentivize them. We should not overburden them with taxes, right? I currently look at the Growth and Sustainability Levy Act, okay? And that act basically is leaving every company, be it small, big, it doesn't matter, right? The only distinction is that if you are a big guy, your levy is 5%. But if you are a small guy, then it's 2.5%. But virtually everybody is being taxed on the accounting profit, okay? And that is aside your corporate taxes. I think we should be giving such smaller businesses a break. We should be incentivizing them to go into business, to do more. We should be incentivizing them to plow back the profits that they make. That's the only way they can grow. That's the only way they can hire 1 or 2 more people. Okay. So when we talk jobs, personally, I'm not expecting the government to be the one employing people. And if we do expect government, we will be highly disappointed because government is limited. Government cannot do much. It's the private sector. Government's job is to empower the private sector, create the enabling environment, create the right opportunities, give the right people the tax, but not the foreigners. There are bills in Parliament. Hopefully, maybe when Parliament comes back, they're going to table them trying to give tax waivers to companies and stuff like that. The question I ask myself is, why are we not giving these waivers to the small business, the Ghanaian businesses, the enterprises, those who are having 2-3 employees? Without that, we will be in this cyclical mode where people don't have much. They live from hand to mouth. They are unable to employ people. The youth keep going around looking for job because they don't have what it takes to be able to start anything, and we will perpetually be in this cycle.
Our educational system equips people to come out looking for jobs rather than creating jobs. Our tax regime overburdens the small business person rather than incentivize the person.
That's correct.
Ima?
Yeah.
This one is Kwame Nkrumah's Ghana we're talking about.
Yeah, and we spoke about it last week where we used the analogy of a baby. A baby comes, and we said the businesses, once they are new at their introductory phase, you don't tax them. Otherwise, you kill them. You are milking a baby. You milk a mother. And so if the tax reforms or the tax policies are not enabling for businesses to grow and peak at their maturities, you will kill them. And you should know that once your businesses are growing, how do you proxy their growth? Not just in terms of the sales they earn, but even the sales will be tied to their production and all of that. They need staff, they need labor, quality labor. And so year on year, the qualified students who come out to be employees will be absorbed by these businesses. And we are not looking at just one business. Different businesses across different sectors of the economy. They'll be pushed in there. Today, if anybody is a medical doctor, there's only one way. Government posting you somewhere. You find few doctors in private institutions. And even those in the private institutions, when you look at the data, you find that most of them are actually in the public sector. And what they are doing is like a backup work or something like that. So you not find a lot of people. That's why we're saying, why is someone reading agric not too comfortable owning a farm or farming after school? But someone who did agric in the university is working at the bank as a teller. Is working at the bank. Is working somewhere.
Are you talking to me or what?
Oh, you did agric.
What's wrong with you?
You are not even in my mind. There are a lot of people on my mind that I'm looking at to make this point. But that is the whole point. There are people who have studied agric and studied some things that are relevant for this economy. Out of school, they are not applying that. They are applying something else. And that gap, if we don't find good policies to close it, will forever remain where we are.
You know, Jerry, I mean, if you look at our Income Tax Act, right, it requires that every year, every company makes an estimate of how much profit they're going to make during the year. And once you make this estimate, you calculate the amount of tax that you will be paying during the year, and to break this tax into 4 quarters. Okay. Now, here's what happens. So you have a young guy set up, and I've seen this time and again where I've got clients come to me and they need tax advice, and they've just set up their business, right? And in order to kickstart or in order to do a few things, they need a tax clearance. And so I need to help them get this tax clearance. But the rule requires that they must make this estimate of how much profit they'll make. Now, you make this estimate, you send it to the GRA, and you get an answer that says, oh, you need to pay something. Or you need to make an estimate that says you will make some profit, so you will pay some taxes, right? And if you say no, you get a bit of frustration, right? And
you're not getting your clearance.
You're not getting your clearance, right? And if you push further, of course, the law makes room for a process for you to go through to get a remedy. But that takes, I mean, you need a clearance in a week in order for you to be able to proceed and do what you have to do. That grievance procedure is going to take you 3 months, right? The guy doesn't have the time to go through that process. So he's compelled to either make that
projection.
That profitable projection. Making the projection is not the problem. I mean, of course, we will make a realistic projection and all that. But the taxman, because of his target or whatever target has been given them, is compelling the taxpayer to make a projection that makes him pay taxes now, right? And if you don't, you go through the cycle. And either he goes to borrow money or he goes to find working capital from somewhere and put it in. We should rather be supporting them. He needs money rather to get an office space. He needs money to buy inputs, and get a business off the ground.
Are we too heavily reliant on our global exports, and that is what is affecting our economic performance? Are we so pro gold and was that one timber and the one that Ima was singing this morning? All the things that we are sending out there, are we too reliant on that to raise money to run this country?
Are we too reliant? Yes, we are. In fact, maybe for lack of a better word, we will say too reliant. We are overly reliant on that. And
so that global prices then hits us.
It doesn't matter, Jerry, what the global prices are, right? I mean, look, the price of cocoa is doing quite well. I mean, we can't say cocoa prices are bad. We can't say gold prices are bad. So even oil, I mean, we are at a time that the prices of commodities are doing fairly well. Why are we struggling? We're struggling because we cannot produce that much to save us as a country. I mean, truth be told, we are 30 million plus population, if I'm not mistaken. The last census put it at something around 28. But we should be more than 30 by now, right? How much gold can we keep mining? In fact, the cocoa farmers are no longer even interested in farming cocoa. Right? and now we must even be worried, right, that the little cocoa that we produce, right, we may be facing a huge challenge in the near future if we don't solve the issue of the pollution of our waters, right? Because now the international market is going to start asking questions as to whether the quality of our cocoa meets the standard that they want, right? Very soon they will start doing all those tests to find out whether our cocoa contains metals and stuff like that. We can't run away from it. So if we don't solve those problems and we keep relying on cocoa, we're dead. Cocoa will not save us. I mean, this year, Cocoa Board, if I'm not mistaken, was unable to raise any international financing. They have to turn to the local market, try to raise 500 million. Only God knows if they succeeded.
Ima?
Yeah, Jerry, spot on. I mean, I agree. Especially now that our farmers don't want to farm on the land, but under the land, farm for something else, metals. And that should tell you the trend of the performance of our agri sector. And sometimes it looks like it is just cocoa, but a number of things. You'll be surprised to note that tomatoes, onions, they are being imported into this country. We're importing onion, tomatoes. You know, Ghana is like, when your soup is not red, it's not soup. In Ghana, yeah, we have some love for tomatoes. The last time I was coming from Accra Safari, I saw a big truck, about 3 of them. They were carrying onions. And I watched the number plate. I think they were coming from Burkina Faso.
BF.
Oh, I'm sure you're familiar with it.
Yeah.
Now, back in the day, we had people's homes had gardens where some of these things were planted. Okra, tomatoes, pepper. I mean, in bits. And prices of these staples were very low. But today, the prices are quite high. And because the prices are high with respect to our own markets, now you need to get them from elsewhere. And that affects us. The moment you are dependent on something outside your boundaries, any external shock directly affects you. It hits you hardly. And that is why it is one of the reasons why you would say we have all the resources, yet we are suffering. It is, when he was talking, I wanted to even say, can't we drive the prices of cocoa and gold? If we have cocoa, if we have gold, we are the leading suppliers of same. can't we drive the prices then?
Yeah, but you and Cote d'Ivoire have come together to do the Ghana Cote d'Ivoire Cocoa Initiative, and it's a very powerful initiative.
Yeah.
The two leading producers calling the shots. You are already doing that. I think recently we were calling the shots as to what will happen between the two countries concerning the cocoa and all that. So in that light, you're doing well. However, you still don't seem to be doing very well.
Yes, because like I said, the cocoa earning curve is higher as you move up, not when you are the supplier at the base. Those adding value to the cocoa are those earning more, and not those supplying the cocoa rarely. And so you need an alternative. You need to turn the cocoa around. You don't need to produce it, send the beans elsewhere for people to turn them around, and they'll bring these chocolate and all, and it even attracts your countrymen or your citizens, and that is what they purchase more. Cocoa beans are not enough. Pricing that is not enough to make the margins. You need to turn that beans around. You need to invest into industries that can turn the beans even better than what you get from elsewhere. Because whatever they are doing elsewhere, they are dependent on the raw beans that you produce here in your country. That is what they are depending. So are we saying over 60 years of the country's independence, there has not been any investment to get people to go there, go and study what they are doing and replicate same in this country? Is that what we are saying?
Initiative Cacao Cote d'Ivoire to Ghana. They're just concerned about the prices, the producer prices for our farmers.
Yeah.
But
that's not sufficient.
Yeah.
That's necessary but not sufficient.
Yeah.
Because I'm saying the earning is higher at the upper part of the curve, not at the lower part. As you move up, you earn
it becomes richer.
Yeah, you become
Mr. Olu, our fiscal deficit, are we saying that is what is accounting for the deficit to invest in infrastructure and social services?
It's partly
part
that.
of it. Okay.
It's partly that. Because remember, right? I mean, and again, when you look at sub-Saharan Africa, right? By far, we are one of the countries that have a very low tax to GDP ratio.
Okay.
Currently, we're sitting around 14%. Okay. Our peers are sitting around 19-20%. In fact, our own government is targeting between 18 to 20%, but we are at 14%, I think 14.1, if I'm to be exact. Now, what it means is that for government to be able to cover all its expenditure, it will have to borrow, right?
Okay.
Because it's unable to generate sufficient revenue from within, so it has to borrow. Now, there are two sources. Either government borrows from the domestic market, which is from people like you and us who are able to save some money with the banks, or they borrow from the international market. Now, the challenge with borrowing from the international market is that you need to show a certain level of ability to pay back. In terms of when they look at your debt to GDP ratio, it must be within a certain reasonable limit, right? I think if you look at the years in chunks, because those are when we've changed government, right? From 2016, for example, we're sitting slightly below 60%, the debt to GDP ratio. Then by 2020, we have gone past 70%. By 2023, which was last year, we were 100% plus, right? Which forced the domestic debt exchange.
Okay.
Now, with this comes a limitation in terms of fiscal space, right? So government is unable to have additional revenue because the majority of the revenue goes into paying for interest on bonds, interest on treasury bills, interest on Eurobonds and the likes, right? By the time government finishes servicing all these debts, there is really nothing left for infrastructure development. And that's why, if you notice, a lot of the infrastructure development we having are by foreign donors. I mean, the likes of the Sino-Hydro. I mean, it's either a Sino-Hydro project, a World Bank project, African Development Project, or European Union or American government, because there's no space for such infrastructure development as far as government spending and government revenue is concerned.
Okay.
It's actually going to be a bit tighter in the years ahead, right? Because remember, and that's something that I think a lot of people don't pay attention to, right? Because in 2022, 2023, what did we do? We suspended the payment of interest on Eurobond, okay? Prior to the debt exchange and all that. Even the domestic debt, we managed to kick the can down the hill and restructured it in a manner that we only start to pay principals sometime from 2027 and 2028. Okay, so we've kicked it down the hill, right? Now, what's going to happen is that once we finish restructuring the Eurobonds and everything is concluded, new debts are issued, 3-4 years from now, the principals are going to mature. What's going to happen when those principals mature? A lot of the government revenue is going to go back into servicing those debts. Unless, of course, government decides to reissue new debts to finance them, which then just puts us in the same cycle, right? Will the holders of those stocks be willing to take new debts? We don't know. Maybe we'll have to wait to get there and see. So the problem is, if we don't have a mindset shift where we have an economy that generates enough revenue, that generates sufficient tax revenue in the right way, we will keep borrowing to finance infrastructure. We will keep depending on donors for infrastructure. We will not get to the end.
Won't we be accused of scaring Ghanaians that they should brace themselves for a tough few years ahead?
They say when you go into a warfare, you are better off knowing what you are up against, right? It's the reality. I mean, it's not. This is not fear mongering. I mean, all the things we are saying are facts. I mean, if you get the statistics, debt exchange, everybody knows about. Everybody knows why we had to do the debt exchange. So these are the facts. We need, what we say is not to make people to be afraid, but to conscientize people and make people aware of what the challenge is. I think the more aware people are, the more better their choices and their decision making will be. And also as a country, I mean, if we have to make a decision as a country, which I think in some few weeks' time we will be making a decision, we have to make the right decision, and we have to be aware in order to make the right decision.
Good point. So we're not fear-mongering, we're just telling you the truth. Exactly. So that you make a decision on it. When talking economic pain points, is it a must that we talk corruption?
I think it's like on the top of the list for me. We can't talk economic pain point without talking corruption.
Okay,
it's one of the key things, right? And it's not when we talk corruption, we must talk about it across the divide, right? More often than not, when we say corruption, people only think, okay, it's the executives,
okay,
right? But we must look at it across the spectrum. And I'm yet to see an economy that has really developed and done well, that is corrupt, right? If an economy should do well, you must fight corruption.
Okay.
Corruption is expensive, even for the private sector. Okay, we have seen instances where things have not gone the way the ordinary Ghanaian will want. I mean, we have seen instances where we have spent huge amount of money on doing things that the Ghanaian doesn't really consider as value for money.
Okay.
We have seen instances where things are approved for cabinet and for the executives and for ministries that one will ask, is it really what the Ghanaian wants.
Okay.
Right. Not all of them may be due to corruption. Some may be misplacement of priorities. But obviously, we need to ask the question: are we, as a country, putting our money where our mouth is?
That's a big question. Are we, as a country, putting our money where our mouth is? It's something that, for me, improving governance, reducing corruption in order to foster economic growth. We cannot have conversations like this without bringing them in, and the need for us to do something about it. It's fast approaching a quarter to the top of the hour, meaning that we have less than a quarter of the hour to go in this conversation. Mr. Ebenezer Ahulu is here with us. We're having a very interesting conversation with him. He happens to be the managing partner of AOB and Associate Chartered Accountants. He's here in the studios with us on Business Breakfast on Z. It's the Ghana report. There's so much to discuss on Ghana, but we'll just touch on some, and then maybe next time we get him in, and then we'll continue the conversation. FDIs. If we're struggling internally, could we say FDIs could also be the way to go? Are we putting in the right place to attract or deter investors? What do you see from where you sit as someone who understands the space? Do you think FDIs are the way to go, and are we doing best to attract the right investors?
So it's a huge challenge that we have on our hands at the moment with FDIs, right? And I've seen a couple of investors, also because of the nature of my work. I interact with prospective investors that are coming in, some that are here currently. I've recently been asked some very difficult questions where a client, for example, asked me, are we at all able to get our money out of this country, right? So if you look 8 years ago, I have a client 8 years ago brought in money into this country. So just let's, without mentioning them and using the right numbers, right? Let's say $100,000. He brought $100,000 in at a time. So that's at the time was around 400,000 cedis. Okay. Today, he's been using that 400,000 cedis doing business, trying to get something going. Today, basically, he's lost almost 80% of that money. Okay. If today he wants to send his 400,000 cedis back, divided by 17, and
he's
you can tell
nowhere near his $100,000.
You can tell how much he's able to get back, right? So the question is, or one of the key drivers that foreign investors look at when they have to bring their money in is the stability of the currency. The more stable the currency, the more likely it is that they will bring their foreign currency. Because remember, they can never take CD out of this country. Their only way of taking money out, whether it's profit, dividend, whether they fold up and they are repatriating their capital, whatever it is, they will have to convert into dollars or into pounds or whatever foreign currency. So the less stable the Ghana cedi is, the more wary foreign investors are in terms of bringing their money into this country. And so if we really want to attract foreign direct investment, we have to be serious about the cedi.
We have to be very, very serious about the cedi. Let's use the next few minutes before we leave to attempt to prefer sustainable solutions to where we are, and give ourselves from now till 2057 to turn this country around. By then, maybe a lot of those listening to us might not even be around, but we're planting trees under which our children's children will come and sit under. What is the way forward with that long-term planning head?
Yeah.
What is the way forward?
I will talk a couple of suggestions. Right?
Okay.
First of all, I think we need to change direction.
Okay.
We need to change direction as a country. That's in my view the first point. If we continued how we're heading now, we will crash. In my view, that's the first point. The second point is, and again, this is common knowledge, right? For those who have read economics, right? During the Great Depressions, right? Where the debate between the classical economists and the Keynesians, right? Where the solution was, let's just employ people to dig trenches.
Mm-hmm.
Let's employ another set to cover the trenches. By so doing, we will pay people, they will go out and spend, and the economy will bounce back. What am I saying? We need an economy that employs more people. Whether we have to divide the day into three, the 24 hours into 3 or 4 or 5, whatever we need to do. We cannot continue producing, if we're producing 100 oranges, we can't continue producing 100 oranges and think we'll be okay. We need to double that number, triple it, do whatever we have to do. I don't know what strategy that will result
but
in,
that
but
must be
we
done.
must double production.
Okay.
However we do it, that must be, right? Then government must slow down on borrowing. Government has got to slow down on borrowing and look inward. Okay, that's crucial. The other point is the financing of government by the central bank has got to also slow down or stop. Okay, because that's also fueling part of the inflation and also a part of the reason why the cedi is depreciating. That needs to stop. We need some very bold solutions.
Okay.
Some of them may be painful at the initial stages, but in the long term will be very rewarding. We've got to brace ourselves, tighten our belt. We have to make this economy work again.
Wow. What you're calling for is someone who can stand in front of Ghanaians and say, I have the plan going forward, but it's going to be very painful. Painful to the point you might not like me, but I still believe I have the plan going forward. If you could give me 8 years, I'll turn this thing around.
Yes.
And someone that we can look in the person's eyes and say, we trust what he or she is saying.
That's correct. There's a very famous saying by Jack Ma. He says, tomorrow will be difficult.
Mm.
The day after tomorrow will be very difficult. But the day after that will be beautiful. The problem is, most people died the night before it becomes beautiful. So what I'm saying is, we must be prepared as a country to tighten our belts, to follow whichever leader will take that bold decisions. The first few years, maybe 1 or 2 years, yes, things will not be rosy, but by the 3rd, 4th, things will begin to see the green light.
Interesting. Tomorrow will be difficult. The day after tomorrow will be more difficult. But the day after that will be beautiful. But unfortunately.
Most people die the day after tomorrow.
Do you think Ghanaians in general, a greater percentage of us, are getting to the point where we are realizing that things are going to be difficult going forward? Or you still think people believe in all these rosy promises and, 3 square meals kind of thing?
Unfortunately, Jerry, we have a very diverse population. I think not many people are still very aware economically. And so the needs are different. We still have a chunk of our population that still believe in easy way out. Let me, if I'm allowed to say that, right? And so the promises will still be flying around. A lot will not be based on substance, because we still have a chunk of the population who are unable to either question or are unable to link the substance to the promise and question and say, but how is this going to happen? Linking the past to the present and then to the future, not many of us are able to do. And so as long as that is the case, you still have an instance where, people will still be getting away with some of those. And perhaps it's up to you and I and the rest of us who are able to put the linkages together to help educate the rest of the public.
Mr. Emmanuel Barton,
Yeah.
tomorrow be difficult. Mr. Ebenezer Hulu, speak. What do you have any last words before I wrap up?
Yeah, my last words are that I see a trend of people, especially young ones, trying to leave the country, usually because of the hardships that are in here. Like someone has said, America can do without you, and maybe your country cannot do without you. And so let's look at the difficulties and challenges, the mistakes that are being made. Rather learn from them and resolve that when we climb up there, we are not going to repeat them, but we'll do what it takes to make things better for the next generation to come after us.
Thank you very much, Mr. Emmanuel Barton. Mr. Hulu, you have the last word.
Thank you, Jerry. I think I'm very confident in this country.
Oh, you are?
I am. We have what it takes to make things change and make things work. We just have to put our minds to it. So I'm very confident in the future. I'm very positive, and God being our help with the right leadership, things will turn around.
His name is Ebenezer Hulu. He's a managing partner of AOB and Associate Chartered Accountants. You heard him on the Ghana Report, the Monday edition of the Roundtable. It's been quite an interesting morning for us here at Z101.9 FM, BBZ, hashtag BBZ on all our platforms. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining me here for the Ghana Report, and I hope to see more of you in the coming weeks. Probably after the elections, I should bring you back so that we have a conversation about what you see happening. It's just a few minutes to the top of the hour. Coming up at 10 is NYA, the brand, and she's coming up with a brighter side. Mid-morning's finest. She is going to take you all the way through your brunch, your late breakfast, and all that, and even till after lunch. It is what it is. One of those days when we give you the hard questions so that as you go about your day, you think about Ghana for some time and ask yourself whether you're playing your part to make sure things work. But as always, my last words. Pray like it only depends on God.